You know what? Today I want to bring you guys back to the to a small understanding. I don't want to sound like I know it all because I know nothing. I don't know too much, but of the war. Another reminder. You guys, we have heard prophetic sayings. We've heard prophecy. We know that prophecy is coming to light. We know those things are coming to pass. We know that God has committed himself to causing these things to happen upon the earth, and nobody's going to change it. We know that fear is an element that we wrestle with. Causes us to say things like, oh, don't make it come, this, that, and the other. Right? And sometimes when things are in the distance, as it was about 20 years ago, talking about prophecy was quite exciting. In this day and age, when we discuss prophecy, seems like everywhere we look, we see a manifestation of something connected to prophecy happening in the earth, if not the entirety of the picture of prophecy coming to light. We see it happening, as was stated in Revelation, when John ate the book, and that book was the book of prophecy. John ate the book, and in his mouth it was sweet as honey, in his stomach it was bitter. So is prophecy. It is exciting to learn, right, of prophecy, of the end of days. It's something we can't really explain. There's an excitement connected with it, but when it begins to happen, a bitterness settles in. John was told he must prophesy before kings and nations and people during the end. And just as John the Baptist did not know that he carried the spirit of Elijah, so do some of you not realize what spirit you carry. That's why Jesus said, man doesn't know what spirit he's of. God does, man does not. God always does, man does not. There's a reason for that. But with prophecy, with these things that are happening, we can so easily be beset by certain assaults. So tonight, I'm going to remind you of the war. A war of a nature maybe you don't know about. Maybe you haven't seen it this way. Maybe you bought the paradigm of the world and its philosophies and have not had them all broken yet. The Lord does that piece by piece. He cannot shock you with all truth at one time. He can't do that. Nor can a man obey the Lord instantly all in one day. But these things are learned through sufferings. And suffering, don't let that word scare you, sufferings, right? If you haven't found out yet, suffering in the Bible is only that of the flesh, which means to forego things of the flesh is suffering, because one does not suffer in the Spirit with the Lord. One grows with the Spirit in the Lord, but through abstaining from things, the body does suffer. Through sickness, the body does suffer. Through pain and anguish, loss, the body does suffer. Not your spirit. Your spirit does not suffer. And a lot of things we do is to keep our flesh from suffering. Parts of the true nature of war. Of this war that we're in. And there are only two things that come out of a war. Do you guys know what they are? Anybody? Two elements in a war. What are they? You have those who fight and those who are casualties. That's what you have. So an innocent bystander can easily be a casualty. In this war, everybody's in it. Everybody. There is not one person excluded. Everybody's in the war. And you have been sent here on this earth to serve in a capacity, maybe in a way you didn't think of yet. I wonder if you guys have noticed when it comes to faith-based things, there's a challenge of trying to believe in those things that are faith-based. Anybody ever faced that challenge? It's a bit ambiguous at best, right? Anybody ever faced that? You can't quite bring it to terms, right? You know about faith. You believe in faith, right? You believe in those spiritual things, but you cannot reconcile it to yourselves. You try, you read, you try to believe, you try to understand, but you cannot reconcile it. And it sometimes makes for a very strange picture of why you're here in the first place and exactly what your role is and what you're supposed to do. Well, we're going to clarify some of that tonight. We'll begin to anyway, because discussion of this war adds clarity to your walk, so you don't inadvertently become a spy. There's lots of spies. Daniel had spies. We were listening to the book of Daniel, and everywhere you go in life, you're going to have a spy. Jesus said so. You're going to have spies on your life. And in turn, you can easily be used as a spy in somebody else's life. In fact, there are common tactics in war that are very deceitful and deceptive, taught by Satan, that are used in everyday life. Jesus warned us about all of them. There's not one. He didn't leave any stone unturned. He turned over every single stone. He did. The apostles likewise. They operated by having those stones turned over, and they would not submit themselves to certain things for a reason. Now, truth be told, we only know of the letters the apostles wrote. We must entrust the rest about their lives, but we only know of their hearts towards those people they were writing to. That's what we know of. Unless the Lord showed you the true nature of one of the apostles. But let me remind you of something. God did not put us here to read minds, and your thoughts are sacred to you. Of course, with Facebook, they're no longer sacred, but anyway, that's the way it's intended to be. Which means sometimes we can have offensive thoughts, and it's not meant for everybody to read them. They do nowadays, because people can't help but to write down everything they think and feel and everything else, like an open journal, right? That too can be used as a weapon, and in fact, it's been working for a long time. Some of you may even find out the root of your sufferings, where the aggravation is coming from. We're not talking about Satan, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something alive in you that is supposed to be cast off. Some of you are in this war running around with old equipment, and it doesn't work too well. Some of you, you have a sword that's rusted. Some of you do. Some of you have a breastplate that has cracks all in it, right? Some of you have half and half. You haven't put on the whole armor yet. And mind you, nothing works without the helmet of salvation. Nothing works. And your shoes, the sandals that you have on, right, they guide your path. In the armor, the sandals you put on are sandals that walk in a specific direction. So if you walk in another, you no longer have those sandals on. You have something else on. So we want to make sure we have the whole armor of God. You guys remember Ephesians, right? The whole armor of God. All too often, we know about the elements of the armor, but don't have them. Here's a sign that your armor is missing. You ready? Simple aggravation. Simple aggravations. A simple aggravation is when something did not work according to plan in some way, form, or fashion. It did not work according to plan. We become frustrated because we want to move on to something else, or we desire to take a break for a few minutes and something messes up our outlook. That's very simple. You have these elements that nag at you. You may not know this, but at the end of the week, they can wear you down. They can pummel you into the ground, a hidden enemy you'll never see. But for tonight's conversation, we're going to talk about the real enemy and some elements in your life that you may or may not know about. How they're working with you every single day, and the loopholes they find in you to work in you. So if you guys are ready for this conversation, it is going to be controversial. It really is. Nevertheless, it's the nature of the war. It's what's happening right now. It's about to escalate, and one day we know that it will fully manifest. God said he would make manifest all things, didn't he? Didn't he? There would be no hidden thing at all. So we're going to discover some things tonight. And I hope you guys can utilize it and start walking through everything in your life. Because if you're not reminded of who you are, now I'm not talking about just the saved and the unsaved. Nope, that's not what I'm talking about. If you're not reminded of who you are, you're going to sit down in a chair in a capacity of someone you're not. Be like a person who owns a store, and they come in the store and somebody says, hey, you can't come in here. And the guy says, oh, okay. And he turns around and walks out with his feelings hurt because he forgot he owns the store. Some of you are like that. You're like that. You have forgotten who you are. You have forgotten those who came before you and what they established for you, that you stepped in to their labor's works. And that many of you have become something because the bricks in your life have been laid long before you ever got here. But you've forgotten who you are. So when opposition comes, you know what you do? You say, oh, okay, let me just go the other direction. Or some of you trying to fight, and you don't have to. Can you imagine the commander of an army goes to sleep and he wakes up, and he can't remember he's the commander of the army. So he goes up to the troops, and he says, look at the enemy. I've got to get past them. How do I do this? He didn't know he can just walk through them. All he has to do is say, move out the way, give me passage. No, that's not what he does. He hides behind a berm. He's using his mind to make a strategy to get through all these troops he sees, but he's the commander, but he forgot. So he waits till nighttime and he loads up his weapons, anything he can muster and find, and he goes out like a wild man, trying to kill everything he sees to get through those soldiers. He could have done what he did in the daytime. All he had to do was remember who he was. I'm telling you this because not knowing who you are can put you in a position just like that. You'll be fighting every day of your life when all you had to do was say move. By the way, if that commander gets involved in fighting the troops, he'll forget his objective. I've seen soldiers do that for real. They get so involved in the fight, they forgot the instructions of what to do after the fight was over. In fact, the main instructions that they had nothing to do with fighting. It had everything to do with reaching an objective and performing a task. Fighting is in between that. Fighting is when you have to get from point A to point B and something is trying to stop you, right? That's where the fighting comes in. But there's an objective after the fight. Sometimes we forget that also. There is an objective after the fight, and often you can get so tied up in the fight, you lose sight of the objective. Reminders, right? Reminders. Wouldn't it be good if somebody came up to that commander and said, wait a minute, you're the commander of all those troops. You don't have to hunker down here and wait till nighttime and run your assault mission. Just stand up and walk through them. You're the commander. Oh, I am. Yes, you are. Some of you are like that. You're just like that. You fight, you fight, you fight. You never had to. And then in the times when you need to defeat your enemy, you try to befriend him. So fearful. Like a dream. How many of you have had a dream of something real scary? So in order for you to get past that scary element in the dream, you yielded to it, hoping it would go away. You didn't want to make waves. You didn't want to draw attention to yourself, so it would attack you. Anybody ever do that? Try to just be a no one in your own dream, not make waves so the trouble would pass you by. But then it found you out anyway. In my life, I found out something. I can sit quiet all day. The trouble will find me. Whatever's assigned to me can always see me, and it's running after me. I can't hide, can't yield to it. If I give in to it, it's going to destroy me. If I fight it, it's going to attempt to destroy me. Right? But then the Lord reminds us who we are. You're not just an ordinary person on earth. That's not who you are. In fact, you're in this world, but not of this world. What a statement. You're in this world, but not of this world. Think of that one. Swallow that one. All right? And digest that one. You're in this world, but not of this world. I wonder how many people even have that scripture in regard or try to rationalize it. And say, well, what he meant was, it means exactly what it says. It's very simple. You're in this world, but you're not of this world. Can everybody say that? No, they cannot. There are some who are truly of this world. They really are. Because they're bound to it. We'll discuss these things and a few more things. We're going to talk about the war tonight, starting with your life. Certain elements in your life. My goodness, it's time to overcome. And remember the objective. And not be lost in the fight, but to start telling things, move out of the way. Just like Jesus said, get behind me, Satan. But you don't say that when you've stopped. You say that when you're in motion. You say things like that when you're going somewhere. So let me ask you this. Where are you going? And if you say to heaven, that's not the right answer. Where are you going? What's your mission? How many of you know what your mission is? Well, we're going to have a good one tonight. We may end up with 2 people listening at the end, but nevertheless, it'll be a good talk. I'll be right back in a few minutes to open this up. Helmets may be required. Fly swatters will be. You're going to be interrupted. I can already tell you right now, you're going to be interrupted. Weird mishaps are going to happen. That's how Satan is. He does not want you to have anything in context. He wants you to hear so that you can accuse, nitpick, criticize, pull apart, and disprove. That's what he wants. The way he accomplishes that is with distraction. So get ready for them. Don't get angry when a distraction comes. Don't do that. But they're coming anyway. Because what soldier will go to war? Who would go to combat? Who would attempt to fight something if they have no idea what their strengths and weaknesses are? Right? So this is going to go back to faith. You guys know a lot about faith, right? Faith is a very confusing subject to some, very mystical subject to others, right? Faith is one of those subjects we assume we know, but we may not know. Faith. You know when Jesus said, every time he healed, right, when he healed somebody, what did he say? He repeated a phrase over and over again. Anybody know what he said? He kept telling people, your faith has made you whole. Your faith has made you whole. That's what he said. Your faith has made you whole. You ever wonder about that? Your faith has made you whole. Anybody ever wonder about that? Right? Anybody ever try that with faith? You're sick and you're like, okay, now if I can believe strong enough, this cold's going to end. Right? Anybody ever try that? Anybody ever have a toothache or something like that? You're like, why is my faith not working? Why? What's wrong? It should be gone. So in order to discuss faith, because we've tried 1,000 ways to believe some things, right? It just didn't work out. Some people are walked in the ways of faith, and they begin to do things. But it's almost like the training is missing. Or let's just say that the philosophy is belying faith, that faith subject. The philosophy. Once again, we're back. By the way, that whole thing shut down for no reason. No reason whatsoever, but we kind of, figured that would happen. Correct? We did. I assume that would happen. But I told you guys distractions will come. Now they're coming for, I get it first and then it goes to you guys. So maintain your sanity. You may run into some complications tonight, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. Things happen. No big deal. That's just an attempt. By the way, I'm going to use that for this conversation because it can be funny, comical sometimes. It can be comical because in this war that we're in, right? If something utilizes or uses a tactic on you and it works, and you respond to that tactic, right, here's what happens. Suppose I was somebody else broadcasting and the whole system reset like that, right? It just reset. And I'm in the middle of a conference, something very important. Well, you have all these troops around you looking. They're looking. They're not good troops. They're looking. And so if I get annoyed, aggravated, I begin to mutter things under my, under my normal tone. I begin to converse a few things. My dissatisfaction. If I show aggravation and everything else, we have all these spirits standing around you. They're taking notice. Ooh, this gets them every single time. So when this person is up in faith, we're going to use this tactic over and over and over again. So they take note of what moves you. Now here's what happens. When something throws you off balance, something in the dark, something in the something devilish, something satanic will take a note of that, so that the next time you get excited about something good, if the light starts shining pretty bright within you, they're going to utilize one of these tactics. They do that with situations. They do it with people, because when you have one of these mishaps, normally you respond by expressing your aggravation, your dislike, your complaints. And while they sit back and take note, they're laughing too. Because every time you get to a certain level of faith, a certain level of belief, a certain level of excitement behind the Word of God, they're going to pull out one of these tactics. They do the same thing over and over again. Because we show them everything that's effective against us. Every complaint you have has been noted. Everything. So they know what to use against you. My advice to you is this. When something like that happens, don't respond. Don't respond. And if you're one of those people that you can't help but to mutter something, start praying, do anything, but don't give darkness the ammunition it needs against you. Because the only ammunition they have, right? The only ammunition darkness has is what you give them. They have no other ammunition. Everything in the darkness that has attacked your life, you have let them know you're afraid of, right? Now, we're talking about, of course, naturally, after the age of accountability. You're arming darkness with your complaints. You're arming darkness with your aggravations. And it will keep coming. The enemy in this case is not armed. Naturally, the enemy is armed by what we complain about, by what we demonstrate. Think of yourself. Think of yourself. If you were in a conversation with somebody on the phone and they said something you don't like, or say a telemarketer calls, right? You ready? A telemarketer calls. You're trying to make a phone call, telemarketer interrupts and messes up your phone call as an emergency. Telemarketer calls and you throw a conniption fit. You hang up on the telemarketer, but nobody's in the house but you're throwing a conniption fit. These old demonic entities are laughing. They're like, oh, yes, this is good ammunition. Right? So weeks go by. Nothing happens. All of a sudden, you're in a hurry again. They say, we know what to use when this person's in a hurry. So they nudge one of those telemarketers or do what they do. And then you get that phone call again and it throws you off balance every single time. And it will continue to do so until you stop arming the darkness. You arm the darkness because while you think nobody is looking and listening, I'm telling you that the entire dark realm is taking note of everything that moves you. And they do things over and over again. Haven't you noticed this in your life? Haven't you seen this in your life? It's the same set of circumstances that pops up every single time when you get to a certain level of your faith or of shining your light. When you're in a good mood, the same thing will happen to bring you down. The same thing over and over again. Because you demonstrate every time you complain, every time you murmur, every time you talk to yourself, you're showing the darkness what works against you. You're giving them ammunition. So don't do that. Don't arm the darkness. Keep your composure. Right? Keep your composure. Now, we're going to talk about faith real quick, and I warned you guys that get ready for distractions. It happens they can't help themselves, and they do the exact same thing every single time. So don't lose your balance because of mishaps, minor or major. Don't do it. Stay on message, stay on point, stay focused, and keep going. Right? Keep going. This small test, this small interruption we just had, because it was not me, it wasn't the equipment. That was some sort of command that came from the ISP accidentally. I guarantee you it was accidentally. And so we're on radio now, so they can accidentally do that again. How you like that? Anyway, but it's still not the regular internet. It's still not switched over now. The chat is on radio right now, so it's doing pretty good. But I wanted some more oomph with the voice. It's on radio now, and we lose a bit of bandwidth and everything, but we're okay. Okay, now back to faith. Now, most of us have discussed faith. We have seen faith, right? We know the scripture. Where's Robino? Is Robino in the house? Robin is the faith reminder, right? Robin is. So, faith, ladies and gentlemen, we all know what the definition is. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, right? Faith. When it says in the scriptures now, faith is. So we have that definition. But, and we also have key points in the Bible where faith has worked some works. Jesus would always attribute a healing to faith, to the individual. He would always do that. And I want to bring your attention to that. Because he said, like Luke 7:50, that, you remember that woman that approached him, he said, thy faith hath saved thee, go in peace. That's what he said to her. In Luke 7, verse 50, he said, thy faith hath saved thee. My faith has saved thee? What do you mean? But then he would say things like, and if you go further in Luke, and when the word came up about what you're going to eat and drink and all these things of the next day, Jesus said, if God so clothe the grass, which is today in the field and tomorrow cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? So he told them they had very little faith. But evidently it was enough to heal them. Evidently it was enough to save them from things, right? But he kept saying it, O ye of little faith. But I'm telling you right now, that little faith was enough to have them healed. That little faith was enough to save them, because he kept saying it. Remember when he was talking to that man, he said, receive thy sight. Thy faith hath saved thee. He uttered that again and again. That faith hath saved thee, or that faith hath made thee whole. He kept saying that over and over again. Yet he would say, O ye of little faith. Oh, he said, you remember the time when he was walking with him so early in the ministry. He said, why are you so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? He attributed some as to having no faith. So we see something about faith here, right? That's ambiguous. What in the world is faith? To understand faith, you must understand yourselves. We have to tackle faith because it's part of something that you carry. If you have no self-identification, how in the world are you going to fight this war and be a victor every single day of your life? Look at the apostles' life. Why in the world, how in the world did the apostles have this peace about them everywhere they went, despite the beatings, despite the jail, despite the infirmities, despite being all these things that happened to them? How did they have peace? How were they so consistent in their letters? How were they so loving? How could they still yet give up everything for the sake of somebody else, taking themselves in no regard? How in the world can that happen? Because they had something we don't. As I was saying before, everything was interrupted. Belying the statement of faith that's subject to faith are philosophies of this world. People have been tampering like witches, trying to come up with a perfect formula for faith. Right? Stand up and stomp your right foot 12 times and point your big toe to the sky. Right? You're going to be blessed or something. That's that formula nonsense again. Obviously, that's not how it works. Now, to understand faith, you're going to have to understand who you are. Which takes me back to a statement when Jesus said, you're in this world, but not of this world. He said, it is not for the world to know the mysteries of the kingdom. That's for you. There are no mysteries to those who are of the kingdom in the Bible. None. Zero. There's one thing held back from them, and that's when Jesus will be sent. That's it. Other than that, there is no mystery. There's no mysteries. Somebody wrote me concerning Mystery Babylon. I pointed them back to a archive, right? And it's pretty awesome how now people are coming to the realization. When I first had that conversation, it was offensive in 2006, I believe it was. I had that conversation about Mystery Babylon. You're talking about offensive because it flew in the face of the popular narrative. Well, you guys know I don't go along with the popular narrative. Anyway, a couple of people wrote, because I was talking about Babylon the other day, and they were talking about Mystery Babylon, and they're beginning to discover something that we have an archive on, which I think is awesome. They're beginning to. Some are, not all, some are, right? Why? Because we're spoiled by vain philosophies. And the rudiments of men, just like the scripture implies. We're spoiled by vain philosophies and the rudiments of men. We're spoiled by this popular stuff that's in the world, which is not necessarily truth. Well, half of it's not truth at all. It's just believable. Faith, evidently, is not believable, especially in this day and age, right? And to understand faith, you have to understand a few things. The Lord said, you're in this world, not of this world. What in the world's that mean? What does that mean? Well, when you're born on the earth, all you know is the earth. That's all you know. That's all you know. Now, I've gone through this story, a small story of why we're all here. I've gone through a small story. But in truth, you're really not of this world. This is a world created to house the children of the living God. Your flesh is from this world, but guess what? You are not your flesh. Your flesh is not you. That's where a lot of people make the mistake. They look in the mirror and they say, look at me. No, that's not you. That's your container. You are not your flesh. What I'm speaking to right now is the spirit in you, not the flesh you. Not the one with the brain, the one with the flesh heart. I'm not talking to that. Not the one with the eyeballs that interprets by what you see. I'm not talking to that. I'm talking to the spirit of you, the truth of you, the real you, the everlasting you. I'm not talking to your flesh. Right? So you can be in this world by way of the flesh, but not of this world, because your spirits do not come from this place. That makes you an alien. Isn't that funny? Isn't that what an alien is? Extraterrestrial. There they go with the terms. You're in this world, not of this world. Meaning that you're of a different plane. You come from a different place. What does the Bible say? To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. All seeds of God will return back to God. How about that one? You're in this world, not of this world. That's why you were born with the belief of Christ. Nobody can explain that to you. You were born with a library in your knowing that is a discerner of more than what you think, more than what you probably used. Your children are the Most High, in training, being raised in the earth to make a decision of yes or no, no matter what. Half of the stuff that happens in your life, most of the stuff that happens in your life is part of a qualification. Here it is. Will you follow your Father in heaven, regardless of your personal condition, without having proof, without seeing a thing? Is it really in you to be family? Huh? Is it? Is it really in you to be family? Because in the beginning, if a bunch of people came down here, having committed nothing, and God came, 2 seconds after and said, well, he separated people, and he said, you're guilty and you're innocent. They'll say, how so? We didn't do anything. We've only been alive 2 seconds. You're going to call us guilty? We didn't do anything. So what does he do? What does he do? How do you get people to see what they are? I'm telling you, this is identification. How do you get people to see what they truly are? How do you get people to see who their Father truly is? If God took us right out of himself and made us perfect, which is what he did not do, and he did not do that on purpose, that's what man is after, because man has a tiny brain. If God took us out of himself, he could have made us without flaw. He could have made us perfect. He could have made us servants who would never say no, never disobey, never break the 10 Commandments. He could have made us that way, but he did not. Listen to me carefully, because a lot of you don't know who you are. Would you like to have a son or daughter? Answer this honestly. Would you guys like to have a son or daughter that did everything you told them to do, that agreed with everything you said, that would never, ever go against you in any way, that would never move without you saying move. Would you like a son or daughter that way? I would not. You know why? Because if I looked down at that son or daughter and said, I love you, how in the world can they say it back and it be true? How can they say it back? How can a person ever say, I love you, unless they had the opposite in their lives, unless they knew what darkness was, unless they knew what pain was, unless they knew what grief was and trickery and all these? You can't say, I love you. From what? Of what basis? How do you think Satan fell in the first place? There was no qualification of love in him. None. Zero. The fallen angels, no qualification of love. And you know what that means? To say I love you is empty. It is an empty statement if not qualified by an existence. When you go through things in this earth and things are unfair and things are against you and you struggle and you toil and nothing is coming to you, then you read the word and you begin to, by the soul, identify with your Father. And although you are mistreated, imprisoned, beaten, sick, and everything else, if you say, Lord, I love you, let me tell you something, that love is qualified. You're not saying I love you because you got everything you wanted. You're not saying I love you because your health is perfect. You're not saying I love you because you're absolutely, totally, 100% can do anything in the world you want to. You're saying I love you out of a truth so deep it cannot be faked. Do you understand? Your love is being qualified here. So that when the Lord bestows all goodness upon you, he knows your love is real and you will never fall. The fallen angels fell. Satan fell. They were family, but they fell because, see, God made family to be able to make their own choices. The angels are not forced to serve righteousness. They are not forced. They choose it. My goodness. I've heard people say, well, you know, God's angels, they just serve him. They don't know anything else. That's what they do. No, they choose to. They could have fallen like the fallen angels. They could have fell like Satan, but they choose him over everything else. Do you understand? And what you're doing is choosing him. You've had a rough time here on purpose because your love is being qualified. Oh, but we're just beginning. That's why people are sent here to this earth. That's why there's a discovery period of who you are. And how is it that all the junk we go through in this life, we can still say at the end, I love you, Lord. Why? Because that truth cannot be falsified. When you get nothing you have earned. When your sickness remains and it seems like everything is turned against you, and you still end up saying, I love you, Lord, and it comes from the depth and the core of your heart because you mean it. Not speaking with words, but speaking with your whole soul, and you mean it, then guess what? You will never fall nor betray him in eternity. And you will be a true family member. And then, when the other ones get up there, and God will say, you're guilty. They'll say, why? It was so precious in the world. Who wouldn't do that? Why? Because I did this? Because I stole a little over here? Because I had a little covetous here? I'm going to be condemned for that? God will say, no. It's because of what you did to the righteous. Because you targeted the righteous. Because you served yourself. Because you had it good. And you ensured you had it good at everybody else's expense. You didn't mind who you stepped on to get what you wanted. Why, my true children suffered. And they strove, and with patience, and with much tears and aggravation and pain, they continued. But you attacked the righteous. You attacked the innocent. You took those who were weaker than you and stomped on them. You're just like your daddy, the devil, who does the same thing. Can't you see this? So even the qualifications of those condemned, as them turning out just like they do the exact same things Satan does. They have the exact same attributes Satan does. You righteous in the world, you're the ones causing the guilty to be guilty because you're the target of them. They cannot help but to target you. It is something so deep that's the truth of them. The truth of the tares, a true tare, is that they are dark and they will always target the innocent. They will always target what belongs to God. Always, always, always. They will always rebel against the living God. Always. They will always think it within themselves that they are owed more than what they have. They would seek to ascend their thrones above the throne of God. They speak above his word all the time with pride and arrogance. And they cast the truth down to the ground. And the Antichrist is the final embodiment of that manifestation on earth, that full rebellion on earth. Everybody's going to see it. All those who are alive are going to see it. Remember what Paul said, that day shall not come unless shall come a falling away first, and that man of perdition be revealed. Oh, yes, we're going to see that embodiment. You're going to see it because you're going to be witness to it. Those of you who have been selected for a very special cause, you're going to be witness to it. Now listen, then the judgment takes place. And he's going to bring out Exhibit A to the guilty. You know what Exhibit A is? You are Exhibit A. That's why Jesus said there are going to be some that get before him and say, didn't we preach in your name? He'll say, yes. Didn't we heal in your name? Yes. Didn't we do this, that, and the other in your name? Yes. And Jesus will say, you depart from me, you worker of iniquity. I never knew you. Because you did not visit me in prison. You did not give me something to drink when I was thirsty. You didn't clothe me when I was naked. You didn't give me something to eat when I was hungry. They'll say, when did we see you in these conditions? What you have done to the least of these, Jesus will say, you have done unto me. So listen to me, what the unrighteous, what the true tares do to you, they do to Christ. Do you hear me? That's who you are. That's why you're in this earth. That's why you have situations. Can you see where complaints have no role in your life? Once you understand why you're here, how can one complain? Knowing this. You're Exhibit A. When did we do that to you, Lord? That's when you come out. You did it to that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. That's why all of you have an accuser in your life. All of you, without exception. All of you have a betrayer in your life. All of you, without exception. You're called by the living God to be a witness. Now listen to me. Listen to me. You remember when Paul, the life he lived, he persecuted the righteous and how he beat himself up? Do you guys remember that? Why did he end up being one of the greatest we know of today? Here's another mystery solved. Whom the Lord called, he qualified. Didn't you read about Paul? When they said, Jesus, do you know what you're doing by picking Paul? That's what they said. That's what they said in prayer. You know what Jesus, the Father, answered? I have raised Paul. I sent him through everything I sent him through on purpose to qualify him to go to the Gentiles. His life was purposed from the Most High. So even his ruthless lifestyle was purposed by the living God, whom he called, he also qualified. Paul had to be hardened on all sides. He also had to be guilty so he could go to those who were doing the worst things than he were doing, and he would have compassion upon. Don't you know that? That gives you a clue of who you are to go to, who you will be speaking to in your life. And some of you, you've been qualified with such things that only you can go to them. God put you here to go to them. I can't go to them. Those of you with the worst past, you've been qualified to go to the people hardly anybody can reach. Now remember, we're just talking about who you are, what your true assets are in this war. This is a war. And there should be no mysteries to any of you who are of the kingdom. Mysteries are meant for those who are not of the kingdom, not for you. Do you guys have all that? Now that you have that, part of your identification. But you had to know who you were, because if you don't know who you were, the conversation of faith can never be had. You can't talk about faith if you don't know who you are.